Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Good morning, everybody. We're just going to wait for people to roll in. Good morning, Brian.
Morning.
Good morning, everybody. You have arrived at the appropriate spot if you were here for the kickoff meeting regarding the Safety and Risk Assessment Tool project. Thanks for joining us. We'll give everybody a couple minutes and we'll get going. And as you enter, it would be fantastic if you could put your name and your position into the chat. We are constantly expanding the listserv for this project, so we can continue to keep everybody notified of all the events that are ongoing. So if you would do that, that'd be great, and we will capture that information before we jump off the call. Good morning, everybody. There's some friends I have not met here. Michelle, where jurisdiction are you from?
I'm with Mesa County.
Okay, nice to meet you. I'm Stephanie.
Nice to meet you too.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Welcome again. It's always odd if you just arrive on a meeting and everybody is quiet. Like, it's weird, I think. You're like, am I in the right spot? Did they already do something before I got here? Like, it's just weird. So that's why I keep talking. I know. I'm just like talking to myself. So I will keep talking to let you know you are in the right spot if you are here for the kickoff meeting for safety and risk assessment tools. And I think we've got a smaller group today. It looks like we have 13 people. Oh, there's my friend Heather O'Hare. Hello, Miss Heather.
Good morning. Good to see you. I'm in the car, so I'm not on video just yet.
No worries. You're with us in spirit. We feel it. Good to see you. Glad you're here. All right. 9:03. Yumiko, am I getting the head nod? We can probably start. Reward everybody by getting them out of here on time. All right. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Stephanie Villaforte, and I serve as Colorado's Child Protection Ombudsman. And so, again, welcome. This is our kickoff meeting in order to implement a House bill, which I'll go over shortly with you. But really, the project is about evaluating Colorado's safety and risk assessment tools. And so we're going to give you the background of this project. And then we've got our team, both from the Ombudsman Office as well as our vendor, ICF, here to talk to you about the actual details and specifics of that project. So again, thank you all for being here. We will certainly save time for questions at the end as well. So please know that that's an important part of this conversation. So in terms of the Ombudsman Office, again, my name is Stephanie. I serve as the Ombudsman for the state, and I have been in this position for nearly a decade, which is hard to believe. I'm also accompanied by my team today, Jordan Steffen, whom I'll have her raise her hand, who's our Deputy Ombudsman and who will also be one of the point people for this project. So you know her. Brian Kelly, who is our Public Policy Manager as well. He helps us keep all the trains running on time and provides us with all sorts of good information for projects like this. So that is our team. And Yumiko, I want you to take a moment and introduce yourself. Yumiko is she is our project manager on this. She has been working with us now for already over 6 months, I think, on this project. Yeah, a while. So Yumiko, if you take a moment and introduce yourself, and then we will get started.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good to see some familiar faces and names. Stephanie and her office contracted with me for this project. It's to help essentially be a liaison, to work with the vendor, to work with the CPO's office, and kind of be the go-between, since there's so many different players' perspectives to navigate throughout this process. So as we'll say throughout the presentation, I'll be kind of your initial point of contact with any questions or concerns as the project moves forward. And certainly, you know, if you have anything at all related to this work, you can always reach out to me first and I can steer you in the right direction. But it's a pleasure being here and being part of this important work. So good to see all of you.
Great, thanks, Yumiko. And if we could go ahead and start our slide presentation. Great, and if we could go to the first slide. We've done introductions, and here we are. So yes, friends, I'm going to take you back in history a bit. Believe it or not, the origins of this project started in 2023. And for those of you, I know many of you were aware and or involved in the... Whoops, we've got somebody off speaker. There we go. Many of you were involved in the Child Welfare Legislative Interim Committee back in 2023. For those who may not have been involved, this was a committee that was convened by the Colorado General Assembly that over about a period of 8 weeks in the summer of 2023. And their primary goal was to really hear from all of the child welfare stakeholders in our state and to learn what are the challenges that we face, you know, what's going well, what is not. And out of that committee, if you will, came 10 different proposals for bills, 5 of which were actually submitted and passed in the 2024 legislative session. Next slide, please. From that interim committee came House Bill 241046, and it was called Child Welfare System Tools. And it did a number of things, but for purposes of our being together today, the bill really calls for an evaluation of an audit, for lack of a better word, of Colorado's safety and risk assessment tool. A number of stakeholders appeared in front of this committee, testified, and gave a lot of evidence or testimony is probably a better word about how this tool, people have really been struggling to work with it for over 13 years now. And a lot of people indicated that, you know, they were looking for clarity and whether or not this is the most effective or the most efficient tool that can be used in the child welfare system. And so the idea behind this bill again, was multifold, but mostly it was a bill that directed my agency, the Ombudsman Office, to contract with a third-party vendor to, in fact, conduct an evaluation on these series of tools. Next slide, please. And so, again, I always say our agency really has acted as the backbone of this, if you will, in terms of just ensuring that the implementation of the bill is carried out. Over the past many months, we have been actively engaged with Yumiko. We started the process by first really doing an RFP for proposals from a variety of individuals. And it resulted in 3 vendor applications. With Yumiko's help, we assembled a team of stakeholders, which included the parties that you see here, from the Colorado Department of Human Services, OCR, ORPC, county participation, as well as a parent with lived experience. And the 5 of us, I think, essentially scored the evaluations, and out of that became the selection of ICF, who was the group of good folks that are in front of you today, and we'll be talking about their work. And since that time, we have been working very closely with ICF in order to get this project up and going, which, as you can imagine, is a substantial undertaking. Next slide, please. So essentially, again, what our role has been was to ensure the proper rules, if you will, and proper procedure for soliciting a vendor. The other piece that we have again been engaged in is hiring a project manager who will be able to serve, as Yumiko already pointed out, between our agency and the counties and the vendor. In that process, Yumiko will be responsible again for really ensuring that she is connecting all the parties that need to be in touch on this. She's making sure that the vendor has all the necessary materials, trainings, all of that in order to do the proper research in this case. Ultimately, a final report will be due from ICF to our agency on March 1 of 2026, at which time we by law are going to be required to submit that to the General Assembly. And so that is really sort of the timeline that we're on. Next slide, please. And so with that, again, that lays out really the background, if you will, of the project, where my agency will be engaged in this. And now I'm going to turn it over to the team over at ICF so that they can introduce themselves and also explain to you where they have been and where they are going as it relates to this process. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ann Graham from ICF. I serve as the project manager and child welfare specialist here, bringing many years of work and experience in risk and safety as well as consulting. We also have on our team Kate Stevenson, who serves as our lead evaluator, who brings her many years of research and evaluation in the child welfare space as well as other human service and university spaces. We have Anna Gross, who serves as our research and review specialist, who brings her many years of research, interest in child welfare, and ability to also keep us organized. I appreciated your note, Stephanie, around keeping Brian keeping the train running down the tracks, and Anna does that for us through her research. And Maddie Langan, who unfortunately could not join us today, who serves as our lived expert engagement specialist, ensuring that we are consistently bringing the voice of lived expertise and lived experience to the forefront and supporting those folks in our work, as well as bringing her own experience in child welfare professionally and personally to the team. Next slide, Anna, please. Thank you. So as Stephanie noted, our team was selected through that procurement process to complete the audit of Colorado safety and risk assessments. In that work, the ICF team will be conducting the audit on Colorado's safety assessment, risk assessment, and identifying those tools and resources to ensure that the assessment is carried out consistently related to the risk assessment. Identifying gaps and solutions to enable caseworkers to complete that assessment while sitting with families real time, examining impacts of geography, as well as race and ethnicity while using that risk assessment tool and how they impact communities that are overrepresented in the child welfare system. Next slide, please, Anna. Oh, we may be stuck. Oh, pardon, one more back, I apologize. Sorry. Further, ICF will be evaluating and recommending best practices for sharing that assessment with families, legal professionals, and the judicial branch. Evaluating and recommending best practices for training on the assessment, as well as examining the assessment for domestic violence or intimate partner violence against recommended best practices. In relation to the safety assessment, very similar, examining the issues set forth and studying that inter-rater reliability of the family safety assessment, looking at that required documentation for the planning and removal of the child or children from the child's primary caregiver. So our work is very much aligned to the legislation and ensuring that we are bringing forth our best work to create the most comprehensive report that Stephanie noted that's due in winter. We'll be able to do this through the engagement of lived experts, the engagement of human services workforce, so those folks who are doing the work on the ground with families, and engaging folks, key partners and state leadership throughout the process. We have two groups who are established, one comprised of those with lived experience of Colorado's welfare system, and those comprised of county staff from across the state. As part of our approach as well, the ICF team is conducting research on national best practices and reviewing Colorado's specific information against the national literature, uniquely using tools that we are developing for this work. Through the work groups, surveys, interviews, and case reviews, we'll be adding to that information that we're collecting about Colorado's tools and practices, as well as impact, and roll that information together into the findings of the final report. We'll be sharing that final report with you, and Maddie and Anna will be able to, chatting about more specifics of our work in further slides in just a moment. We also wanted to talk about a timeline so that folks know what to expect coming up. Great, thanks, Anna. So as you'll see here, we'll be engaging stakeholders throughout our time together. In the coming months of summer, we'll be conducting research, collecting information, and developing the protocols for the various work underway. In the fall, we'll continue to engage stakeholders, continue that research, continue to collect and analyze data, which will inform the work of winter, where we finalize the data collection process and analysis that rolls up into that report that will be available in early 2026. We'll also plan to meet many of you again in February of 2026 to hear the information about the findings. And now you'll hear from Anna, who has more information about our approach.
Thanks, Anne. So as Anne mentioned, I'm going to talk some more about the engaging stakeholders component of our project. So stakeholder engagement, like we said, is a key part of this project that will be ongoing throughout the entire process. This will ensure that our findings are not only technically sound, but also grounded in the realities of those most impacted. And like Anne mentioned, again, we'll do this through a two-pronged approach, through a work group approach as the first one. And as part of that, we'll have two work groups. So first is the lived experience work group. This brings the voices of individuals with direct lived experience in the human services system, and their insights will help us infuse authenticity and relevance into our findings by those who have lived it themselves. And then we'll also have a human services work group composed of county level caseworkers and supervisors who understand the system from an operational perspective and who implement these tools daily. These work groups will meet monthly, providing continuous feedback and guidance on the work. And then for everyone who we're not working with during the work groups, we'll also engage in targeted interviews and discussions. And these are really important partnerships that will conduct focused conversations with county managers, directors, and of course, state leadership, again, being that all of these agencies are also key partners in the work. So these engagements with stakeholders overall and contributions will be essential to ensure that our work is not only technically rigorous, but also deeply informed by those who are impacted and work within these systems. So to give you a little more details about the work group recruitment process, to ensure we included the right voices, we used a structured selection process for the two work groups. First, we began by sending formal invitations and an interest form to a diverse group of potential participants, and then you can see those groups to the right of the slide. For our worker work group, we sent out invites to the 64 county human services directors via Colorado Human Services Directors Association. And then for lived experience work group, we sent them to the following organizations and did some more targeted recruitment for areas where we were lacking representation, which we'll talk about on the next slide. And then reviewing the responses, we considered several key factors to ensure that we had meaningful representation for our contributions in both of these work groups. These considerations included, first, the type of lived experience for the lived experience work group, including current or former foster youth, parents with lived experience, kinship providers, and others. And then for workforce experience, we prioritize folks who are on the front lines using the assessment day-to-day, caseworkers and supervisors. And then we also consider just general familiarity with the Colorado Family Risk and Safety Assessment tools. For both, we also consider race and ethnicity to reflect the diversity of communities served. regional representation so that we can ensure voices from across the state are included, and then just general availability scheduling considerations for participation in monthly meetings. Wanted to note that lived experts for the lived experience work group are compensated for their time and contributions, which recognizing, of course, the value of their expertise and time. And selected individuals for these groups were engaged directly by us, ICF, with next steps. Wanted to mention the first human services work group meeting has happened, and we're excited for the first lived experience work group to kick off next week. This slide shows you a little more about just the work group demographics and membership selection. So here's a snapshot. For the lived experience work group, we've included individuals across 3 different regions representing 4 counties and bringing unique perspectives based on their lived experience, including 3 parents with lived experience and 2 former foster youth. And for the human services work group, we have frontline staff across 5 different regions representing 7 counties. We've got 5 caseworkers and 3 supervisors. Wanted to mention recruitment is ongoing for both groups to ensure we have representation needed to gather meaningful feedback from these groups. So now I'll shift us over to talking more about the portion of our project methodology where we're going to review Colorado's documents, including the risk and safety assessment tools, paired along with informal and formal documents that are used by staff and intended to support effective use of tools. So some of these support documents include training materials, desk guides, FAQs, and protocols. So here, plug in here if you are aware of any additional documents that you feel are critical to understand current Colorado practice. You can send them to Yumiko, whose contact information will be on the last slide, and then Yumiko will pass those along to us. So the review of these materials will be conducted using a tool or rubric the ICF team is creating based on the National Best Practice Research Review, which I'll talk more about on the next slide. So this document review will help us gain an understanding of what a sufficient infrastructure to support caseworker effectiveness looks like. It will also help us to develop findings around how to implement a consistent use of tools across regions. And then lastly, this document review is a key first step to informing the protocols for the case review, survey development, interview guides, and work group discussions, lots of things that we'll talk more about in subsequent slides. So as I mentioned, we'll be conducting a review of existing research related to best practices in the implementation and impact of national safety and risk assessment models and tools. So on this slide, you can see the search strategy used to generate these findings, which lists the criteria for initial screening, the full text review, and our data analysis sort of steps outlined. Example search terms that we'll use on the right hand of the slide include safety assessment model specific terms like structured decision-making, signs of safety, action for children's safety assessment, family evaluation, and then we'll also just use some broader terms like safety assessment, safety tool, and risk assessment. By doing this, we're aiming to capture a comprehensive review of research that focuses on child welfare safety and risk assessments, published after the year 2000, and could be an academic publication, formal program report, white paper, or commentary, so capturing a diverse type of formats. And then once we have this best practice research, we will identify key findings and recurrent patterns and gaps in the research. We'll summarize and compare the effectiveness of best practice models using themes related to reliability, validity, cultural appropriateness, and practical application. And then, like I mentioned on the previous slide, this information will be used to create the rubric or review tool we'll use for Colorado's document review, as well as help inform all other data collection efforts. And then also want to mention, because the national best practice research is applicable to all stages of our project, it will iteratively be an ongoing process that will continue throughout the project as new information is identified. So to talk more about our the rest of our data collection efforts and analysis efforts, I'll pass it over to Kate.
Thanks, Anna. Happy Friday. Good morning, everyone. So as Anne and Anna both described with our approach, the work being done to review current tools and expectations within Colorado, as well as the best practice, are really foundational to all of the methods that we're additionally using to layer into our analysis. So one of those will be case reviews, and we want to get a sample of cases to review to look at what documented practice on these tools looks like in Colorado. So the expectations are set. We have viewed what best practice says should be included. And then what does that look like in actual case documentation? So what kind of observable things can we see there? And then also looking at available objective metrics. So things like timestamps and that kind of measure that we can pull to also add to what we can glean from actual case documentation. In our sampling, we'll want to make sure that we're getting as representative of a sample as possible. So looking at the life of a case, everything from removal to reunification, and how these tools are used in helping with that decision-making process. Also examining populations that are disproportionately involved with the child welfare system. So examining by race and ethnicity, and then any variability by geography. So variability that you may see throughout the state based on unique characteristics due to geography. And really the purpose with the case reviews is to then layer into a number of those legislative items, right? So we're going to be examining case practice compared to what we have observed in our audit of the tools and the various documentation to support the use of those tools, as well as best practice, and then looking at specific parts and components of that legislation and how that the documentation within the case reviews can help inform how that is looking within the state of Colorado. Go to the next slide. And so then additionally, you've heard a lot about the work groups that we've got going to really get some deep information about those that are most involved and using the tool most regularly, as well as those that are most impacted by the tools. But we also know that there are important voices that we need to be including in this review as well, in terms of state leadership and other key partners. And to get a similar level of depth from those individuals as well, we want to make sure that we're doing some interviews. So this will allow for us to get some really good insights from other perspectives and levels of interaction with the tools. And then also thinking ahead to our findings and the report that we'll be putting forward, hoping to get some more context in terms of organizational capacity and what any sort of findings that we will put forward could be as actionable as possible and applicable within the context of Colorado. So for this effort, we're really looking to do 6 targeted interviews, and those are with individuals, representatives from like DCW leadership, training, looking at county directors and managers, as well as ORPC and OCR. And the purpose of these interviews, again, we'll get perceptions from these individuals. So what do the supports look like for the use of these tools? What kind of barriers have you all observed and been able to witness that we should be taking into context with our analysis? Any sort of geographic variability, impacts due to race or ethnicity, and how consistency might look in comparison to the policy expectations set forward. And then with our review, we have targeted questions with the specific legislative items, as well as comparisons to best practice. So we will include those within our protocols to examine and gather perceptions on specific items. And then also looking, again, to highlight some of that context of what this means in Colorado, how this makes sense within the work that you all are doing and that you know best. So really wanting to make sure that we're folding that in with everything and considering that within our report. And then in our research, we want to make sure that we're kind of hitting a nice balance between depth and breadth. So we want to get rich data, which will be possible through interviews and our focus groups, meetings with the work groups, But we know that we're not going to necessarily be able to connect with everybody within those kinds of methods. So additionally, we'll be looking to complete a survey. This will really allow for some more flexible opportunities for more feedback to be involved within our work. And the survey will focus on understanding quality and frequency of specific practice and have targeted questions to gather feedback from the participants. We're looking at about 30 probably individuals to be targeted to participate within the survey. Right now, we're thinking that that'll be additional frontline staff, managers, and directors. But there may be other stakeholders that we identify through our review that we really want to make sure that we include within the survey effort as well, so that we can get those additional voices. The survey will be examining things like training supports, barriers, as well as maybe generating some suggestions from those individuals on how to overcome those barriers, examining regional variability, disproportionality, and disparate outcomes, how the tools are useful in assessing DV and IPV, how the tools help with consistent decision-making based on the assessments, and then also, again, with those targeted questions, examining alignment with best practice. And then, as we've talked about, I think maybe a number of times in this presentation, but the work groups also will serve as a primary data source for us. So not only will we be meeting consistently and having them give us feedback and inform the review process along the way, but they will also be used as a primary source for us to be able to do focus groups to gather their direct feedback. Again, from those that are on the front lines implementing this tool regularly, but also from families that are affected by these tools. And in those kinds of discussions, we'll be really trying to understand some of the barriers and, again, assess suggestions for specific parts of the legislative bill that we're examining, but then also talking through impacts, again, based off of race and ethnicity or geography, again, wanting to look at domestic violence or intimate partner violence, the kinds of training tools and supports that are used for consistently applying these tools, and how that helps support consistent decision making. And again, then with those targeted kinds of questions around comparing best practice. In the end, then we'll pull all of this together. And so ultimately, we'll be putting all of this into a report, but really we'll step through each one of the methods, explaining what was done, what was found, but then based off of the specific elements that we're examining through this review, we really want to layer in all the various kind of faceted information that we've pulled together through these various methods. So we'll have an understanding of the expectations from the documents that we're able to review. We'll have an understanding of what best practice should look like based off of our national research. And then the voices that are pulled together from surveys and interviews in our work groups, as well as documented case practice through the case file reviews, and bringing all of that together so that for each of the elements that we're examining, we're able to show a more integrated picture of what that looks like, and give more useful feedback in terms of the findings. And then ultimately, this all gets compiled into a report. Our final report is due March 1st of 2026, but we're looking to finalize our report in early 2026. Again, that'll step through our methods. We'll have our results on our best practice research, our review of the documents within Colorado, and the case file review summary, themes that we see through the surveys, interviews, and discussions that we're having throughout this review process. but then wanting to highlight overarching themes and comparisons that we're seeing through each of these methods, and then summarizing those by the specific requirements within the bill. And then really coming back and circling to you all to share this information. So probably in February of 2026 is really our goal, but the format and structure of the final presentations will look to make sure that we're sharing this information back with you all and folding that into our process as well. Reasonably, we could look to be sharing some preliminary findings as soon as this winter, as well as early 2026, and then having those discussions with you all to present high-level findings of what we're getting through the various methods and what we're seeing, and then also hopefully creating a space for facilitating some action steps and thinking about like what's next based off of those findings. Not that that's our role, but that it will hopefully help with a transition from this process to something that's usable within the state. And then we have a number of opportunities for you all to help inform and support this work. First and foremost, we want you to be able to reach out with questions. So we have Yumiko's contact information here, as well as Jordan's, and they will be wonderful for assessing your needs and answering any sort of questions, as well as if there are more technical items, they know how to contact us, and we can definitely make sure that we address any sort of questions that might be coming up about what this review process looks like. And then another plug, again, to send over documents for us to include in our review. So if there are any sort of things that you believe to be really critical and you want to make sure are represented, we can only review what we know exists. So getting that information to us will be helpful in making sure that that gets represented within this process as well. And then when we get to the point of doing our surveys and our interviews, just making sure that you all are encouraging participation and making sure that in those efforts we're getting the best information and really good response rates is always really helpful. And then I also want to highlight that we have office hours that we're hosting next month and throughout into October. That is going to be hosted by ICF as well as Yumiko. And I believe that those times are all on CPO's website. So we want to make sure and encourage that you all attend those if you are so inclined.
Great, thank you, Kate. I appreciate it. And yeah, just again, one more way that you'll be able to stay engaged. Our agency is putting up a web page that will be going up in July very soon. That will contain, information such as these meetings, which are being recorded, or, the PowerPoint presentation and a variety of other documents and information, if you will, from meetings, et cetera. So there'll be a lot of different ways to stay in touch with all of this. So with that, are there any questions?
Real quick, I did have a couple questions. When we were looking at the experts that are going to be working on the group, I didn't see CASA as part of that work group, and they're a huge stakeholder, especially in court processes. And we seem to have all the court players and judicial players as part of the teams. Is CASA something that, is that a group that's been invited?
Yeah, thanks, Mick. And Yumiko, I'm going to turn that one over to you.
And I'm going to punt it to ICF. I'm curious how you all see CASA as a potential player in folding them into some of the interviews and surveys. I think from my conversations with ICF, Mick, we're still kind of navigating, right, exactly which partners and folks to reach out to in some of those things. So there's certainly room to fill that out more or add more as needed.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in. I think you've rightly identified, Yumiko, the methods would be through interviews and surveys. I think, Mick, you may have entered CASA as a question mark when we were discussing the work groups, and there are not CASA representatives on the work groups. So those are really frontline staff and supervisors, as well as lived experts, with the goal there of really getting informed insights on those that are regularly using the tools and directly implementing them, as well as those families and youth that are impacted by the tools. But I don't disagree that CASAs would be critical to include in this process. And I think interviews and surveys would be the best method. So we'll continue to have those conversations to make sure that we get them folded in the best way possible.
Yeah, thanks,
All right.
Mick. Does that answer your question? And did you have a second, I thought?
Yeah, I did. You know, one of the questions I had is, you know, kind of looking at the bill and looking at the work group, and the presentation really kind of alludes to, you know, how do we provide better training, better support? How do we do better jobs in the field? But is the ultimate goal to provide support, or is the ultimate goal to rewrite the risk and safety assessments and implement new ones? Because I think that is, you know, again, trying to think about being not only good stewards of practice, but good stewards of taxpayers' dollars is, you know, the cost of this. You know, we have ICF now contracted, we have, you know, multiple partners and time and energy spent. So really, is the ultimate goal to provide support around the current tools, or is the ultimate goal to completely scrap them and rewrite them?
Yeah, Mick, what I would say is there is no ultimate goal. And what I mean by that is this, the evaluation is wide open. And whatever conclusions this team comes up with based on that research and the data and, again, the surveys will determine what those ultimate recommendations are, which could be everything from we just need to better refine, say, training around the existing tool, or it could be we need to amend the current tools, or it could be we need an entirely different tool. So I would say to you, there is absolutely no predisposed conclusion of what should happen, and that was by design. That is why this group is taking the time to research national best practice and compare it to Colorado practice and to move through that process. So the answer is there is no predefined outcome. And it will just largely depend, I think, on what the findings and what this group come up with.
And I think my final question, and I know Kara's got her hand up, so I'm not trying to interrupt you, but you know, the final question is, you know, bills usually come out of a concern or a worry. You know, someone feels like practice isn't, you know, up to par, or families aren't being represented appropriately. So really kind of what brought forth the birth of this bill, specifically around looking at the risk and safety assessments, because, you know, during the state's PIP, you know, there was a work group that looked at the risk and safety assessments as part of that too. So are we just kind of repeating, you know, a process that's already been done?
Yeah, and what I would say, Mick, is that there was testimony from many agencies, including our own, that identified the misuse, if you will, of both the risk and the safety assessment tool. And of course, as you well know, if tools are misused, and I mean that in a good way, right, and not in an intentional misuse, or if tools are difficult to use, right, they yield potentially really concerning results or outcomes, right, both for children and their families. So there was testimony by not only my agency, but a variety of other county agencies. And if you are interested in going back a couple of years, I believe that there are transcripts and testimony from about 5 weeks of testimony on this issue and many others. So that is available. But yeah, it was identified as a concern. It was identified as a longstanding concern for, frankly, almost 13 years. And the fact that, yes, the federal government had identified it as a concern, and yet we really haven't put the resources into addressing it were all issues that precipitated this particular piece of legislation.
Great. Thank you. That helps.
Sure. Thank you. Karen.
Hi, everyone. Kara Nord from OCR. It's nice to see everyone. I just wanted to first start off by saying thank you to CPO for taking on this project. I think this is incredibly important work, right? Safety is at the foundation of everything that we all do, right? If we really think about it. So it's so important that we're all on the same page related to safety. So I just wanted to give you all your kudos. Secondly, I just wanted to note, Mick, I thought your question about involving CASA was interesting because it made me think about how, again, everyone in the system needs to have a common understanding of this word and how we apply it. I train OCR's new attorneys every year on safety, and I like to use, I had to find it, that's why I was walking around a little earlier. I really like to use the child safety guide that was put out by the American Bar Association. I know that this is one of the tools that was created, that was used in creating DHS's tool. But I find this just very easy to understand and to use. They always break things down into 3 simple steps. And, you know, that appeals to attorneys, 3 simple steps. My point in bringing this up is, wouldn't it be great if we had a tool that we could all use, right? CASAs, courts, judges, magistrates. I mean, we're all constantly, caseworkers, we're all constantly assessing safety. So maybe this is a little bit too lofty. Maybe this is outside of this project's particular scope, but wouldn't it be great if we could come up with a tool that we could all use? And so then we could be furthering common language, common application, and then maybe we wouldn't shirk so much when people use the word safety, because we would all know what it means and how we're applying it. There's a little, I don't know, precursor maybe.
Thanks, Karen. And I saw ICF writing things down. So you were starting a conversation. So thank you. Yeah. Other questions? Any hands that I did not see?
I guess a question I would have, back with that is, I don't know that we're all trained to assess mental health, and we rely on the mental health professionals to tell us that. We all rely on, drug and alcohol specialists to tell that, and we're not all trained in drug and alcohol. Kind of that's one of those things about child welfare, is being the child welfare experts on safety. It is kind of like, again, a tool for everybody to use. And if that's the goal, great. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, a tool from multiple perspectives is going to have multiple outcomes. And so I agree, it would be great to have a tool that we all understand the language on and support and understand. But again, everybody comes from that different perspective. And so really, truly, the child welfare safety and risk assessments are really meant for the child welfare professionals who assess that on a daily basis out with families in the field. And so, yeah, I think a common tool that everybody understands is very important. But a common tool for everybody to implement on their own, I think that's a little bit different.
Thanks, Mick. Other comments, questions? Okay, I see none. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. I hope that this presentation has given you some insight into where this project is and where it is headed. And of course, our agency, Amico, we're always available. Really, this is the community's project. And I like to emphasize that. It is for people who who are intimately connected into this field, who are responsible for assessing safety and risk. And so our goal from my agency's point of view is just to make sure there's as many doors and windows open for you to be involved, have your opinions heard, and to keep you informed. So please take advantage of that. If there's ways we can do that even better, those of you who know me and our agency, we are always willing to do whatever it takes to make sure we are all as a community working towards the right goal. So just thank you all for being here. And with that, you will be hearing from us further in the weeks ahead. Yumiko, did you have anything, last parting words?
I don't think so. I really appreciate the start of this conversation. I think we can hear just from these few comments here that there is a lot underneath this project that is central to the work that all of you do every day. So appreciate all of your engagement. Mick, or no, Grant, that was your question in there about working with ARD. Thank you for bringing that up. We will definitely, I think that's a question of kind of ICF doing their independent evaluation of and case reviews, but also being informed by some trends and things that ARD has found over time. So we will definitely take that into consideration as well. But yeah, thank you all so much. Please don't ever hesitate to reach out with any additional questions, concerns, layers you would like to see added. Knowing how complex this all is, we definitely would love to hear from you. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a good weekend.
All right. Thanks, Stephanie.
Bye-bye. Well, team, I think we have one participant left. Jennifer, are you still on there? She might have stepped away.
Stephanie, if you're the host, you might be able to.
Yes, I was just thinking that.
I think Karen may be the other host.
Yeah, I was looking for my share screen privileges. It looks like I was only given share screen privileges, but
Oh, I feel so powerful.
Looks like Jennifer has signed off now.
No, I signed her off. I used my authority. I used the power of my mouse.
The ombudsman hammer is coming down.
Can I do that every day when people upset me? No, I'm kidding. Oh, all right, friends. Well, thank you. I think another successful presentation, and yeah. Yumiko, who is Mick? I don't know Mick.
I don't know. I don't know. I've never interacted with him before. But there, it was right. There are lots of layers and players here. So I think it'll have to be a question of, with limited time and resources, how deep and far do we go? So I'm glad those suggestions were brought up for us to consider for sure.
Yeah.
I had just looked up. It sounds like he's from Canyon City. Just from looking at his LinkedIn really quickly, it says he's with FCDHS, which I'm not even sure what acronym that works out.
Okay, I knew you'd be on it. I knew. I'm like, Brian's doing LinkedIn as I mentioned this, right?
Yeah, I was Googling as well.
Yeah, Fremont County DHS.
Fremont County.
Fremont. Great. Okay.
Is in the chat.
I had a side conversation with him, like a private message back and forth, just because I wasn't sure of the context of his CASA question mark. So I said, what question did you have? Happy to help. Sent him the link to Colorado CASA. Then he repeated his question that he would ask verbally. And then just at the end, he said, Stephanie, thanks, great information, and I do appreciate the work that you are doing. I think he, erroneously sent it to me, but I said that I would pass on his message.
Well, good. Yeah. Yeah, always meet somebody new, which is good. So yes, friends, I think you're getting a flavor for just, I think people's enthusiasm, right? Their desire to be engaged or involved at some level. And I think, Kara's comments, I think are particularly telling. One of the big movements in Colorado has been for Kara's with the Office of the Child Representative, so Guardian ad litem, and ORPC, Office of Respondent Parent Council, have increasingly been wanting to understand the safety and risk assessment tools because they obviously implicate the clients that they represent very deeply, right? Sometimes for years on end, depending on how things are scored or things are not scored, as the case may be. So you are going to see a real desire, I think, that for whatever results from this process, that is, it's an everyone's understanding tool, right? As opposed to sort of this highly specialized technical thing that nobody else can access. Judges don't ask for it, right? Representatives. I mean, I've been a lawyer for many years, and I will tell you, up until the last handful of years, maybe, Guardian ad litem, ORPC, judges always just take the results of whatever is given to them and make decisions. And increasingly over the last 5 years, there's been a lot of skepticism about that just because errors have happened, things have happened to kids, right? So I think that's what you're hearing here. And it's a deeper concern than we've had ever. I mean, I would say this is a relatively bigger push for advocates, is understanding this. So I think it's interesting.
It's also typically challenging for staff, for child welfare staff, to articulate why the safety finding was scored the way it was or landed the way it was. And that becomes harder and harder for CASA attorneys on for either party, and judges in particular, to understand. So when we can't articulate it, the family can't understand it, those involved can't understand it, and that's a challenge.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. You're right.
Yeah.
I just want to make a note.
Go ahead, Brian.
No, I just want to say, just so that I remember, and I've already talked to Karen about it, but just we are still recording. So I'll just make sure that this part gets clipped off before we upload it, one way or the other.
That's fine.